are this way or not. People read a depiction of a period, a historical period, and say, well, clearly that was inevitable. That A led to B, led to C. Most obvious, Hitler's rise to power. And my experience as a journalist certainly taught me two things, particularly having reported from the Soviet Union, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other places before '89, is that there is no inevitability. There are all sorts of factors that happen, personal factors, forces at work, that there could have been different outcomes at different times. And that when you're there in the midst of those kinds of events, trying to figure them out as a journalist, anybody who tells you I got everything exactly right, is likely heavily editing their own history, because we all got things wrong. We all made wrong calls, and sometimes even with epic events, even more so, it just seems you've got to stretch your imagination to imagine that things could go so much in a different direction. And so with that as a premise, I became really fascinated by this question about what did American journalists, diplomats, visitors, and some of whom were Jewish, by the way, think about that whole period in Germany when it was happening. And as much as possible, I tried to write Hitlerland from that perspective, relying on correspondence, the reports at the time, diaries, memoirs, all sorts of whatever I could get. In some cases, you have to, where I could, I would compare what they write later about what they thought at the time with what they actually did. What they were writing or saying, and you always wanted to triangulate.
I'd love to ask you about some of them in particular.
Okay.
Just plucking a bunch who struck me as really fascinating to read about. Dorothy Thompson.
Right. Well, Dorothy Thompson, here's someone who was, of course, the most famous female American female foreign correspondent of her era, a very smart journalist. And her most famous, huge mistake, having an interview with Hitler in November 1931. She sets up this interview. She writes afterwards, I thought I was going in to meet the future dictator of Germany. In less than 50 seconds, I realized I was not. Such was the startling insignificance of this man, and goes on to describe all the things that why this is hard. It's impossible to imagine this man becoming the leader of Germany. Now, two things to be said about that. One, of course, later on, she revised her views very radically, and is one of the early American correspondents kicked out of Germany. Two, as a journalist and who sometimes writes histories, what I found interesting was some of the most revealing and interesting stories are the people who got it wrong and why. Of course, we admire people like William Shirer, Edgar Maurer of the Chicago Daily News, who was one of the early correspondents who really got it right. But why they got it wrong says almost as much about why so much of the world got it wrong, including, in some cases, German Jews. And it's because meeting Hitler face to face in those days, even when he was already the Wall Street crash had happened, his party was surging back, there was a sense, this man is too bizarre. He talks to you as if he's talking to a rally. His eyes don't make contact. He has these funny mannerisms. He's quote unquote not manly enough, whatever that means. He's seen as effeminate, and somehow that being a sign that the real German politicians are going to outmaneuver him, which, by the way, they firmly believed, of course, we know. So Dorothy Thompson makes that big mistake, but then rebounds from it and provides a really early reporting as soon as Hitler comes to power. That's among the strong. They've said a lot.
Something she writes in, I think it's the preface of her 1932 book, I Saw Hitler,